Okay, I know that most people want to move on from the 2024 season for a myriad of reasons. The main one being Georgia didn't win a national championship, so it's time to look forward. And I agree, and what we're doing is looking forward. But while it's the middle of June, let's look back another time of the 2024 season. My question to you is, will this season be just as memorable or more memorable than Georgia's back-to-back national championship seasons? Are we going to look back on what happened in 2024 and say, hey, that was like, you cannot forget what happened that season. You'll never forget it. For me, I've obviously been able to be up close and really right in the middle of all of the action this decade for Georgia football so far, and that'll continue this season. But I feel like I have plenty of memories, and we can go down memory lane about the championship seasons as well. I'll talk about a little bit about that in this video. But when I think of 2024, I don't know how I'm going to forget some of these moments and just how crazy the season was. Let's go through why it's going to be just as memorable as the championship seasons. Ryan Keller from Dawg Post asking you to go to dogpost.com, but I won't waste any more of your time. Look, on a personal level for me, the season started out with me on crutches and in a knee brace because I had a knee injury over last summer, had surgery, and I had to start out this season crutching myself around Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And Georgia played Clemson, and they just destroyed Clemson. And you're thinking week one, oh my goodness, this Georgia team is probably the best in the country. They just waxed Clemson 34-3. Man, Carson Beck has some chemistry with Colby Young and London Humphreys, his new transfer portal wide receiver targets. Cash Jones, Nate Frazier, things looked really good. And on a defensive level, they look really good. And then you move on to a couple weeks, and Georgia almost loses to Kentucky up there. It was getting dark out. It was an afternoon kickoff, but it's dark by the end of the game. And Georgia just barely wins this rock fight, back and forth field goal fest with a late touchdown. And it's like, oh, there's some problems, right? And you think about, well, this college football season in general is going to be different because Texas and Oklahoma are in the SEC, Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA, they went to the Big Ten. And these conferences are different all of a sudden. And there's no Pac-12. And the college football playoff is not just a 4-team deal anymore that we knew for a decade. It's a 12-team playoff. And we knew that the regular season was going to be more difficult. I think that maybe to an extent devalued a little bit, but definitely more difficult. So through 3 weeks of football, you don't really know what to think about with Georgia because they crushed Clemson. What I would consider to be an okay 48-3 win over Tennessee Tech happened. And then, of course, they went up to Lexington and barely won. So it was like, okay, I don't really know exactly what to think of this Georgia football team. You get a bye week before Alabama. For me personally, I'm starting to walk again a little bit. Still had to bring my crutches to Tuscaloosa with me. And if you were in Tuscaloosa on that day, you will remember how chaotic it was to get into that stadium because President Trump was there. Or I guess he wasn't president yet, but he was in the election September. So the election hadn't happened yet, but the former president and then now President Trump was there. And they made a big announcement about how he was going to be there. There was Secret Service all over the place. It was just an absolute cluster to get into Bryant-Denny Stadium. It was a disaster. It took us forever to get into the stadium. A lot of people had issues. Dean, Matt, and myself, we end up helping these two young women carry in the national championship trophy into the stadium. It was a chaotic day for the Dawg Post crew. That's actually how we got in. Because we got stuck in the crowd, waiting in line. There's dogs everywhere. It's like TSA. And we basically kind of snuck our way in, acting like we were helping them bring in the trophy. Now they were complicit with us doing that, obviously, but that's how we got in early enough to where it wasn't a matter. And then met Shane Gillis as we walk in. So from a personal standpoint, chaotic. And then that game, of course, ends up being an all-time classic college football game. Alabama gets up 30-7 in the first half. Just absolutely railroads Georgia in the first half of that game. Very much in the first 16, 17 minutes of action, right? Probably a little bit more than that, actually, really. And Georgia is just drowning in that first half. Alabama, Jalen Milroe putting on one of the most impressive dual threat quarterback performances that I've seen in person. Georgia storms back, makes great defensive adjustments, starts scoring touchdowns, and all of a sudden they have the lead. Georgia has the lead on a Dylan Bell spinning huge 67-yard touchdown reception, and Georgia's up 34-33. And it was like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe what I'm watching. And just a few minutes later, after the commercial break, Ryan Williams' game-winning touchdown happens. And that kind of happens. The press box is pretty well placed at Bryant-Denny Stadium, and you're in the 200 levels. And the side that Williams spun on, he goes flying right by us. And there was cheering in the press box. The stadium is one of the loudest stadium moments I've heard in my time going to college football games. That includes as a fan and as a media member. It was one of the loudest pops I'd heard of noise. And it was crazy. And I'll never forget that happened. I'll never forget being at that game, and everything that happened that day is one of the most... it's going to go down as one of the most memorable days of my life. So then you get back to Athens, and Georgia has this really boring game against Auburn, right? And no one is going to look back and remember that game except for sickos like me who remember, I think, a Dominic Lovett touchdown, something. I don't even remember everything that happened in that game because it was boring. And then you had a strange game against Mississippi State at home in Athens, right? So October was kind of weird and quiet until they had to go to Austin, Texas. And they had to go to play the Texas Longhorns, who were the number one team in the country, on the road in Austin, the first year that Texas is in the SEC. So we got to fly out there. And from a personal standpoint, we flew to Dallas because of how much more expensive it was to fly into Austin. We had what should have been a 3-hour-ish drive, ended up being a 5 or 6 hour-ish drive. We did an electric car for some reason because Dean wanted to experiment with that, and that was a mistake because we got a bad one. And we're having to stop in the middle of Texas, like Waco, Texas, Walmart parking lot, charge in an electric car. And we get down there, and the game itself was an incredible atmosphere. I'll never forget what it was like at that stadium out in Austin, Texas. And it's right in the middle of downtown. It's cool. And in terms of fireworks and just overall festivities, it was an amazing environment. And Georgia just has an all-time half, the first half, an all-time defensive performance, making Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning not look like Division I quarterbacks. That's how good Georgia's defense looked against them in that first half, and led by Jalen Walker. And then crazy stuff happens. A pass interference is overturned, something that you never see. And was it because of the pressure that the Texas fans put on the refs by throwing things onto the field? I'd never been to a game where that happened either. That was crazy. And then you just move on to the following month. Pretty typical big night game between Georgia and Tennessee, right? Not anything super memorable, but then you get the 8 overtime game against Georgia Tech, and it's like, oh my goodness. It's like the second longest game ever. And Haynes King, that's one of the best individual athletic performances I've ever seen in person. I've seen Stephen Curry, I've seen Tom Brady, but in terms of a performance, what Haynes King did to Georgia on Black Friday last year is up there for one of the most impressive I've seen with my own eyes in person. And Georgia wins this amazing 8 overtime game. A miraculous comeback in the second half. Ridiculous. Then the SEC Championship happens, and they rematch against Texas, and Carson Beck gets hurt on the last play of the second half, and it's like, oh my goodness. Gunnar Stockton goes in. Game ends up going to overtime. Georgia wins the SEC Championship in overtime. and you're just like, I cannot believe what is going on this season. I'm never going to forget what happened. And then you go to New Orleans, Sugar Bowl. You know, you don't really know exactly what to expect from Georgia with a new starting quarterback, and Kirby Smart's father passes away that week, and it's just an emotional game, and there's a terrorist attack the night before the game, and the game gets delayed a day. It was the 2024 college football season. I'll never forget it. I think that I will remember the details of it maybe more than 21 and 22. And I was up close for both of those national championships as well in this capacity. And I, of course, remember many of those moments. And if you're interested, please tell us in the comments, and I'll do a trip down memory lane. But 2024 was special, crazy, sad, bad, good. All of that happened in 2024 for the Georgia Bulldogs. It was very memorable. So that was, it's a year that people probably don't want to talk about as much, but I just wanted to flesh that out and really get your memory going. Is this just as memorable as years that they were more successful? I want to know what you have to say in the comments down below, and thank you for watching.